Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Blythe Robinson, and welcome to Breaking It Down with Blythe. I love these conversations because I get to bring in experts from the field to talk about specific areas of interest and importance and relevance. And so this afternoon, I am very excited to welcome Dr. Laura Bakosh. Am I saying that right? Yes, from the co founder of Inner Explorer, and she will tell us all about that organization. I will say we at Sheltering Arms are so happy to have Inner Explorer as a partner of ours. It really has a tremendous impact on our children and our families, and you'll understand our children and our staff and families, and you'll understand exactly why I say that when you hear from Laura. So, again, I want to welcome Laura here today. And to get us started, I always like to ask for our guests to share a personal favorite early learning and experience of your own.
Thank you so much, Blythe, for having me. I'm really excited to talk to you today. So, from an early learning standpoint, I think one of my fondest memories, I was about 5 years old, and with my best friend Janice, we used to sit on the ground or lay down on the ground during recess and just watch the clouds fly by. And I think probably a lot of people have a similar experience. We would just sit for as long as we could and just kind of maybe pick out shapes, and mostly what we did was we just were being. We were together, we were settled, and just noticing the world around us. And it's funny because people would call that mindful, being mindful. And little did I know back then that mindfulness and with students would become my life's work. And some 40 years later, that friend Janice would co-found Inner Explorer with me. So a lot of people don't know that, but Janice and I have known each other since we were 5. So it's pretty exciting, and it's actually amazing to have this opportunity to do this work with kids. It's so inspiring every single day.
So, wow, I just learned that. And, those early experiences really do impact us in tremendous ways. And so I love, number one, that when you called her name out, I thought, oh, she remembers her friend from 5 years old. And now to learn that this is your co founder in this very important work. And you both were practicing mindfulness at such an early age. Like, what a full circle experience and moment, and to for this to be your passion and career is so remarkable. So I love that. I love starting that way. And so let's jump into the organization you and your friend co-founded. Tell us about Inner Explorer and really why that organization is so necessary and important today.
Yes, and it's funny because I would love to tell you that I practice mindfulness every day, all the way from 5 years old till now, but that would not be true. And I think what a lot of people recognize is that life gets busier and busier and busier the older that you get. And when we were 5 years old, it was more than 50 years ago. And things have become much, much more stressful since then. So I'd like to start by just sharing why this work is so necessary. And I can sum it up in 2 words: stress resilience. So stress isn't going away, stress is getting higher. 75% of students report chronic stress, and most of us adults have that experience as well. So resilience to stress is becoming critically important. And what many people don't know is that the effects of stress are biological. So when we are in a stressful situation, a whole bunch of things happen in our body and in our brains. And generally it's to help us get through it. So we get this fight or flight reactivity. And so it would be important for folks to kind of understand, especially from a brain standpoint, what happens. So I use this hand model of the brain. Lots of people might be familiar with this, but basically there's 3 parts. Try to get it right. There's the brain stem, which is depicted by my wrist. That's kind of connects our spine to our brain. Then there's my thumb, on the inside here of my palm, and my thumb would be the limbic system, also known as the fight, flight, freeze system. So again, everybody's pretty much heard of that. And the third part of my three-part brain is my where my fingers are, and that's called the cortex or the cortical structure. Right in front of my knuckles would be right behind my forehead, and that's called the prefrontal cortex. Of course, educators know all of these things. So the prefrontal cortex is where we learn most things. So math and science and reading and letter recognition and so on is all based here in the prefrontal cortex. It's known as the seat of civilization. It's known as the executive center. So I hope I'm demonstrating how this is so important to learning and to our lives. But what most people don't know is when the limbic system is triggered, so we're in fight or flight, and as I just described, 75% of our kids tell us they're in chronic stress. So when that limbic system triggers, the thinking brain goes offline. So we say to kids, it's like you flip your lid. And I'll ask everybody on the line here, how many of you have experienced that kind of thing in life where something happens and you just trigger, you go off, right? You're flipping your lid. It's not that you don't know to not punch somebody or to not throw something or not to say something mean. We all know that, but sometimes we can't access that knowledge. And this is why, because that knowledge is not accessible during that time. So, in a world where many of us are experiencing chronic stress, we're like this all the time. And so we aren't surprised that learning suffers. You might be sitting at your desk, but you're not taking in that letter recognition or that math lesson because you're like that, right? You may be in community with another child, but you may not be able to manage through that because you're stressed. So you're just triggering the littlest thing that happens, you kind of go off. So that is what's happening. And that's a matter of biology. So I would love to tell you we can just think that away or tell a kid to take a breath and that's all you need. That is not how it works. When you're in that biological state, you need strategies that are already built in so that you don't flip your lid as often. And that's why people are excited about mindfulness. So I'll kind of transition into Inner Explorer. So mindfulness literally downregulates the fight or flight reactivity so you don't get as mad when stuff happens. Like imagine somebody cuts you off and you don't get as mad. A kid says something mean to you, you don't get as mad. So mindfulness, when you do this every day, that's what happens. It also upregulates or activates the prefrontal cortex so kids can think more clearly, can focus better, and can learn better. So the research shows that kids get in trouble less, right? They're not having as many behavior problems and they're doing much, much better in school. So Inner Explorer's focus is to bring these tools into preschool all the way through high school classrooms in a way that's easy, inexpensive, and highly impactful. So that's kind of the program, if you will, that we bring in. So teachers press a button. They don't need to know all about it. They just can press play and day one, day two, day three, and so on through the school year and through the summer. And everybody listens together. So it's kind of a community approach. So your teachers may be experiencing stress as well. Many early learning educators and educators in general have a lot of stress that they're dealing with as well. And these practices give them 5 or 10 minutes a day to settle themselves along with their students.
So, Laura, you shared a little bit about the program, right? And so I want to make sure that the folks listening understand what that they understand how it works, right? So tell us, Inner Explorer as a mindfulness program or initiative, like what happens, and specifically in our early learning environments, right? Because we know that the stress does not start in sixth grade and eighth grade and 12th grade, right? Children are experiencing stress very, very early on. And so, talk to us a little bit about how it works in our preschool, pre K classrooms or in pre K classrooms in general.
Yes. So, Inner Explorer is a technology platform. So, there are 180 days of practices per age group. So, in early learning, there's 180 practices. They're each about 5 minutes long. And so, the teacher would just log into any network device. It could be a phone, a laptop, whatever. And all of the students with the educator and staff listen together. So it's sequenced. So day one, day two. So they don't have to think about what do I pick or whatever. And it's sequenced on a world renowned protocol called mindfulness based stress reduction. It's been around for 40 years. It's what all the adults are already doing. When you read about the US military, corporations, sports teams, it's all based on this MBSR format. And that's what we use. So it's really, really well researched. But the teachers just need to press play. Everybody listens to that 5 minute practice and then they move on with their day. It's really easy to integrate into circle time or right after recess, any time that the teacher feels like they need kind of the kids to get back to focusing. That's where we recommend. But we do say do it at the same time every day because the kids will get used to it. And in fact, it's funny because we find that once the classroom gets into the habit, the kids really love the practices. They know they need to settle. It feels good. They understand it. They will ask for it if the teacher forgets or if there's a substitute for the day. We had a school in San Francisco that had mostly children. It was like a newcomer school in the district. So for kids that are just here from other countries and don't speak English yet. And you can just imagine, for a moment, the journey that many of these kids have just taken, right, to
Yeah.
even to get here. And the stressors of that kind of journey, and then they get to a place where they don't speak the language and probably don't have a lot of the things that they may need. So in this particular school, they were doing Inner Explorer every day. The kids were really having a lot of benefit from it. And their teacher was sick. So the principal of the school stepped in to sub that day. And at the time that they always did Inner Explorer, the kids started saying Inner Explorer, Inner Explorer. They didn't know hardly any other English words, but they knew Inner Explorer.
Love that.
So the teacher was like, well, we're not going to do it today. And they were kind of insistent. So she went next door and asked one of the other teachers to help her log on because she just hadn't done it yet. And she actually snapped a picture and sent it to us. And she's like, we've seen the changes, but to have them be so intense to want to do their practice that day.
Yeah.
And the minute she turned it on, they were all like just beautifully settled and peaceful. And I just feel like when, as the folks are listening, when we think about the world that we want to live in, right? We want to live in a world where children and all of us adults have an ability to regulate ourselves, have ability to be the best version of ourselves. And it starts young. And these practices can definitely help.
hmm And so, thank you for sharing that example and how it works. We all could. I think if once we all begin to practice mindfulness, if you do, you know when you don't, right? You know when you're like, oh, I missed my mindfulness or meditation or whatever that practice is for you
Yeah.
today and I want to get back to it. And so I love that this is really establishing habits, right? Positive habits for our children that they may carry on with them through their lives. And it's not just about establishing this habit, right? It's about then how does that play out? What are the behavioral changes you're seeing or you're hearing from those who are incorporating this program? And so, can you tell us? You shared an example, but give us just some other success, if you will. I'll call it a success
Mhm.
story, but another
Yep.
success or success stories that you can share,
Yep.
hearing from providers, specifically in this early age group.
Yep. So I will say that there's two pathways. We have a lot of rigorous evidence. So there's been a lot of scientific research on our program and on these practices in general that give us a lot of confidence that when children learn them early, they will be able to thrive and will be put on a different trajectory. I'll ask folks to sort of consider that in the United States, the majority of children are below grade level in every grade, in every subject. And
Mhm.
that, just sort of as you get your head around that. And what we see mostly is that children who are in communities that are under resourced are the
Mhm.
ones that are the most affected. And I know you know that living in Metro Atlanta, like any urban, folks living in urban communities, they know that in their own community. So what we have found is that these practices level the cognitive playing field for children that are under resourced. They're
Yeah.
helpful for all children. I mean, that's why Olympic athletes are doing it. That's why US military is doing it. That's why lots of top performers use these practices. But for children in under resourced communities, it is literally transformative because it gives them these kids are largely affected by stress, right, due to their circumstances in life. And when we help them understand that they have the power to develop resilience in the face of the challenges that they're dealing with, they transform. So the research shows that children have 20 to 30% better grades and test scores. That's incredible, right?
Yeah.
In urban communities, they have 60 to 70% less behavior problems. In fact, we're doing work in Clayton County, in Metro Atlanta as well, and they told us that their top three schools, so the three schools that are doing InterExplore the most, not their top, but I mean the ones that are using our program the most, have had zero behavior problems for an
0.
entire quarter. Zero. I mean, when you because and we understand this, like kids act out not because they're bad kids. They act out because something challenging is going on in their lives and they haven't been taught the coping skills or the life skills to get through that. And that's what this is.
Mhm.
So we have a ton of stories. One for early learning that I can think of, it happened in Sarasota. Actually, it's one of my favorite stories. It was a pre-K classroom, and the teacher had been using our program all year and was telling us, oh, things are going well and kids are more settled and regulated. And it's not just trying to have them not have behavior problems. They become better at interacting and more engaged in the material and all of those things. That's what we want to see. And she said, but one of the boys who had been a real, like very challenging behaviorally, was starting to kind of get more regulated and was able to sort of keep with the program of school. But she said one day she was across the room, he's building this tower of blocks, and another little boy walks over and bumps into it and knocks some of them down. And she said she was way across the room and she was too far away to like do anything, and she didn't want to yell, but she's like, I just watched this unfold. She said the kid picked up the box of blocks, like scowling face, clenched fist, lifted it up over his head. And she said, and all of a sudden she just saw like a big breath, like his face loosened, his grip loosened. He put the box down and he just walked away. And you think, what if everybody could do that? What if
Yeah.
our politicians could do that? What if everybody in the world could use those skills to kind of modulate how you're going to be? It's not to say you're not going to have emotion, but it's to say that you're going to be choosing how you're going to express that emotion. And
Yeah.
when we can have kids that are 3 years old and 4 years old making those choices without any interference from anybody, they just know. Like that's incredible, and that's what we're most excited about. We're in 4,000 schools, but there's 130,000 schools and centers in the country, and we want to have mindfulness in all of them.
Yeah. And
Small task.
yeah, a big ask, but this is something that when we think of initiatives and programs, there are many that are a heavy lift, right? This is not a heavy lift. This is something that, in addition to benefiting our children, we know that our teachers also appreciate that 5 minutes of mindfulness, right? Because that teacher then also has that regular practice, um, is also addressing his or her own sort of emotional regulations and things like that.
Mhm.
So the impact it has not only on the children, but on the teachers is a win-win, right? And so again, this isn't now you have to change your classroom and you have to do this and bring all of these things in. It's really, we are going to do this together for 5 minutes, and it's an expectation of our day and our routine. So I know you also hear stories of teachers sharing how it has impacted their lives and also their way of teaching.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. um, One of the teachers in Charlotte who just started with our program in their pre-K program called MEC Pre-K shared with me that he does the practices on his own before he even has the kids come in, and then does it again with the kids. He's like, my life is stressful, and this is really helping me. And then there was some research that the University of South Florida did in 39 Head Start classrooms, and what they found was that the educators had not only measurably less stress, they had less burnout and less secondary trauma. Because if you imagine, right, you're one person and you're taking 15 kids in, or however many kids are in your classroom, and they may all have trauma. And so trauma is shared in some ways.
Yes.
Like if, and so that secondary trauma, having that be reduced gives those educators just a little bit more clarity in their own lives. And the other thing I'll say just about the time, and you're right, it's such a low lift, is that teachers tell us that they gain time in the
Mhm.
day because when the students are more regulated and paying more attention, whether it's preschool all the way through high school. Some high school teachers said we got through, additional sections of physics because the kids were just ready to go. So we know there's always a time element, but we know for sure that you will gain time when you do this. One last thing is I want to share that we provide it for free for families too.
My
So if
next.
any of the families are out there listening, you can get access for free from your school district or school's license.
Yeah, and that was my third sort of win-win and win for the families
Oh,
as well, right? Because the adults in our children's lives, parents or any caregiver, um, also benefits from this. And so, in addition to them having the access, I know that when children have the access, they bring that to families. I know in one of our centers we had that story of a pre-K little girl who, mom was having a challenging emotional moment. And she said to mom, mom, we just need to breathe, right? And she was taking the practice that she's learned through Inner Explorer in her classroom to bring that home, right, to mom. And
mhm.
so it has an impact. Just across the board. And so when you say there's, I should have said this in the beginning. If there were questions, to put it in the chat. But I see a lot of comments happening in the chat about just how important this is, and there's someone who said, I've enjoyed using it as a parent, and it makes a big difference. And so when you so parents can talk about it as parents accessing it. Do they access it the same way, or how that works?
Yes, thank you. So what we encourage parents to do is and they'll get a link from their school or their center,
Mhm.
and they'll be instructed to download the Inner Explorer at Home app or Inner
Mhm.
Explorer at Home, and that will be connected to the school or center's license, so there's no cost. And so then the family, whoever it's parents, caregivers, aunties, grandparents, whatever, have access to the full program. So you might have older kids or younger kids, and so you can use all the different age groups, but also the families can tune in to the same practice their child is listening to in class. So you can have a shared experience with your child, which is my favorite feature actually, because I think that as adults, a lot of times we don't prioritize our own health as much as we prioritize our children's. But
Mhm.
if our child's doing it and we have a chance to kind of tune in and literally experience the same practice, it just gives us kind of that window into what they're doing. It gives us something to talk about. And it also gives transparency because, frankly, parents want to know
Yeah,
what's happening in the classroom. So,
that's right. That's right. And so I will ask the audience, those who are tuned in, if they have any questions or more questions, to put them in the box. The one thing I will say is we're excited. We have been very fortunate to partner with Inner Explorer as they were introduced into this Atlanta, Metro Atlanta market. So some early adopters here in the community, and we have extended this partnership to ensure that all of our centers will have access to this beginning in the new school year. And so we're very excited. We'll get our teachers trained, and those who have been using it are certainly wonderful spokespeople within our organization, and we look forward to understanding, learning, and seeing the impact that it's going to have on our children, on our staff, and our on our families. The one thing you shared in an example about the teacher who practices mindfulness before the children come into the classroom. I'm a big proponent of mindfulness and taking those moments. And we are always so rushed and have a lot of things going on, and we're running into the office to get ready for the day. And one of the things I used to say here in our administrative office, which I'll probably go back to, is, when you come in, settle down first, right? Like, take those 5 minutes of mindfulness moment to get yourself settled, because too often we're running in, I'm sorry I'm late, I was in traffic, and I spilled my coffee, and all the things, right? And then we're just rushed into beginning our day. And it's hard to be our best selves when we don't take that time. And so I love this as a reminder to all of us, even if you are not using the app, but just, in life, to really embrace those moments and use, 5 minutes is not a lot, right? Let's at least take that time. So if I could ask you, Laura, so, you shared a lot about the why, and then you've founded this organization to solve for the why. Tell us a key message you want to leave everyone listening to our conversation. What do you want them to leave with? What's really important? A message or two.
Yep. I think if I were to have everybody kind of remember one thing, we talk about mindfulness is to mental health what toothbrushing is to dental health. It's something you do a little bit every day, and it is protective. But in this case, it's protective for brain health. And I cannot stress enough, because everybody I know brushes their teeth, and it takes about the same amount of time. So what I really encourage is for people to understand that it doesn't take that long to really help brain development and brain health. And when you start early and you're consistent, it really does change everything that happens after that. You're a better learner, you're a better partner, you're a better communicator, and so on. So this is not a phase or a fad. This is something that's really important, and is more important now than ever as the world gets more complicated.
Thank you. And there was a question about the app and how to find it. It was dropped here in the chat, and visit innerexplorer.org. But I won't steal your thunder, and we'll ask, how do people stay in touch with you and the work that you're doing, and all the great things happening at Inner Explorer?
So please check out our website, follow us on social. It's innerexplorer.org, as you just mentioned. And the program is accessible on the app stores. So there's Inner Explorer Regular, which is the teacher version, and Inner Explorer Home, which is the family version. But mostly we provide it as a whole building, so that educators don't need to download it on the App Store, because we provide it as a license to the facilities, which is what we're doing with Sheltering Arms. And we're grateful for Sheltering Arms jumping in early and being one of the innovators in that community, in the Metro Atlanta market. So it's been a great partnership, and we're grateful. And
Thank
reach out to me, lbakosh at interexplore.org. Lbakosh,
Yeah,
Bakosh. Yep.
thank you. I want to make sure that people follow you and your organization to continue to stay abreast and learn more. And we are just about out of time. There is one question that someone asks that I do want to address. Do you think that mindfulness is where it needs to be, or do you think that there are still more opportunities for advocacy? I would say always more opportunities for advocacy. I know you would agree. So I think
Yes.
that this is something we all need to really stress and really speak out for. Right? We know that there are such positive benefits to mindfulness, and you've highlighted the work that is being done, the studies that are showing just how much of an impact this has on our children and their educational journeys and experiences. And so we are all in with Inner Explorer, another wonderful partner of ours. I can't wait to share stories from our organization, or more stories from our organization, about the impact. And so I want to thank you again, Laura, for joining us. I told you 30 minutes was going to go by super fast, but know that anyone who missed this, it will remain on our pages, and so they can watch if they've missed anything. I also want to add a plug to follow all of our social media sites at Sheltering Arms. You are obviously following us if you are tuning in, but you can also catch us on these three platforms plus Instagram. I will be doing this again in late summer, early fall. So stay tuned for our next topic. And again, thank you, Laura, so much. I just
Thank you.
love this. And, our partners, we couldn't do the work that we do without partners. And so we really value our partnership with you.
Thank you so much. And I've loved every moment.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye
Bye.
bye.